Ethan's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "We need to sell this place, Hannah. The longer we wait, the worse the market gets." He was standing by the window in Grandma's old bedroom, hands shoved in his coat pockets, eyes scanning the cracked wallpaper like it was a balance sheet. I didn't answer. I was still sitting on the edge of the bed, the same one she had passed away on just 3 days ago. The mattress sagged beneath me, creaked as if it, too, had grown tired of carrying loss. The room still smelled like her, a mix of lavender oil, musty linens, and that faint scent of cornbread she always baked when I was little. He didn't turn to face me. He never did, not in this house. "I already spoke to a realtor in Portland," he continued, voice flat, rehearsed. "He's ready to come down next week. Just give him a date." My fingers dug into my jeans. Dirt from the cemetery still clung under my nails. I hadn't had the strength to wash it off. It felt like scrubbing away the last trace of her. Ethan finally turned, exhaling with a sigh that carried no grief. "Hannah, are you even listening?" He was handsome, I'll give him that. Clean-cut, confident, the kind of man people trust in a courtroom or a boardroom. 12 years of marriage, and I could still trace the sharp lines of his jaw from memory. But standing there in Grandma Louise's bedroom, in his city boots and wool coat that probably cost more than the entire house, he looked like a stranger, a well-dressed intruder in a place he didn't belong. "I just need a few days," I said quietly. "I want to go through her things. Say goodbye properly." Ethan gave a dry chuckle and sat on the edge of the bed beside me. The springs groaned louder this time, almost in protest. His hand landed on my shoulder, heavy, not comforting but claiming. "Let's not romanticize the past, babe. It's just an old house. The roof leaks, the pipes are a mess, and the heating barely works. You really want to spend your weekends fixing up a corpse?" I pulled away. The cold inside me sharpened. "It's not just a house," I said, voice low but firm. "This is the home where I learned how to ride a bike, where she made quilts by hand, where every tree in that orchard was planted with love. This is where I was raised." He shrugged, already standing. "And now it's real estate, an asset, one we desperately need to liquidate if we don't want to default on that second mortgage." I looked up at him, and for the first time in a long while I didn't feel guilt. I felt disgust, raw, rising like bile. "You already made the call, didn't you? Before she was even buried." He didn't flinch. "I make decisions, Hannah. That's what I do." I stood slowly. My voice was steady. "I'm not going back with you. Not yet." He blinked. "You're staying? Here? Alone?" "I need time," I said. "And this place, it needs me right now." Ethan's mouth tightened. He grabbed his keys off the dresser and headed to the door. "Fine. You've got the weekend. After that, we move forward, with or without your blessing." The door slammed behind him, shaking the frame, and I was alone in the silence. But not the same silence anymore. This one felt like a warning. The sun had dipped below the tree line, casting long, bony shadows across the frost-bitten yard. I was still in Grandma's kitchen, cradling a chipped mug of cold tea, staring out the window at the bare orchard. It had always looked so peaceful in winter, like the trees were holding their breath. But that night they looked like skeletons. The gate creaked. I jumped. My heart knocked against my ribs, like it was trying to escape. Through the kitchen window I saw her, the neighbor, Edna Whitlow. She lived 2 doors down in the house with the rusted mailbox and the porch swing that never stopped squeaking. Everyone in Rosewell knew her, the town's unpaid historian. She knew who'd buried what, who cheated on who never paid for their lumber at Garrison's. Edna didn't wave. She didn't smile. She stood at the gate like a ghost, wrapped in a patchwork shawl that looked older than me. I stepped onto the porch and pulled my sweater tighter. "Evenin', Mrs. Whitlow." She looked over her shoulder before she spoke. "Your husband gone?" I nodded slowly. "Drove back to Portland." She stepped closer, her boots crunching on frozen gravel. "Good. Then we can talk." I didn't move. Something in her eyes stopped me cold, not malice, not gossip, something more primal. Fear. She reached into her coat pocket and held out her hand. In it was a key. Heavy. Iron. Rusted like it had been buried in the earth for years. I stared at it, confused. What is this? Her voice dropped to a whisper. The cellar. The original lock. Before he changed it. The words barely registered. The storm cellar? It's empty. Grandma always said it was full of rats and old boxes. Edna's eyes narrowed. Louise hadn't been down there in years. You think she even knew what he was doing under her roof? I shook my head, trying to laugh, to push it all away. I don't know what you're talking about. She gripped my wrist, stronger than I thought possible. Her hands were cold, like bone wrapped in leather. If you knew what your husband was doing while your grandma was still alive, you wouldn't be standing here talking to me. You'd be calling the sheriff. My breath caught. The trees seemed to lean in closer. Ethan helped her. He brought groceries, meds. He brought secrets. Her whisper cut through the frost. He brought shame to this house. My mind raced. I wanted to pull away, go inside, close the door, lock it, pretend I'd imagined her. But my hand closed around the key. It was heavy, colder than the air, and it hummed with something I couldn't name. Edna took a step back. You don't have to believe me. Hell, I hope you don't. But go see for yourself. And when you do, she paused, eyes locking with mine, just be ready. Not everything buried down there is dead. She turned and disappeared into the dark, her boots crunching down the road without a backward glance. I stood there, the wind clawing at my hair, the key burning in my palm. The cellar, the locked door beneath the back hall. I hadn't thought about it in years. Now I couldn't think about anything else. I didn't sleep that night. I barely moved. The key sat on the kitchen table between me and the silence, daring me to pick it up again. It looked out of place there, next to Grandma's sugar jar and her old recipe cards, like a wound that hadn't healed. At 5:14 a.m., I stood up. The hallway was dark, the air colder than it had any right to be. I pulled on one of Grandma's old flannel coats, hanging by the door. It still smelled like cedar and smoke. The cellar door was just past the pantry, tucked into the corner beneath the stairs. A place you'd walk past 1,000 times and never look twice. I'd never seen it open. Not once in my life. The door was low, wrapped in cracked green vinyl and warped with age. A shiny new padlock hung from the latch. Thick, industrial, definitely not the kind Grandma would have bought. My pulse quickened. Ethan. He'd replaced the lock. Why? What was he hiding? I crouched, fingers trembling, and brushed away the cobwebs clinging to the bottom of the doorframe. Beneath the new lock, hidden by years of dust and neglect, was the original latch, the one Edna had mentioned. My hand found the key. I slid it in. It resisted. Rust scraped against rust. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't turn. I almost wanted it not to. But then a click, loud and final, like a gun cocking in a movie. I froze. The door shifted open a crack, sighing like it hadn't breathed in years. The smell hit me first, wet earth, mold, and something metallic, like blood that had dried long ago. I fumbled for the wall switch. Nothing. Of course. Ethan hadn't left a flashlight either. I stumbled back into the kitchen, tore through drawers, until I found one of those old metal flashlights, the kind that needed 2 giant D batteries. I shook it. Dead. I popped the back open, found spare batteries in the junk drawer, shoved them in. When I hit the button again, the light flickered dim and yellow, but it worked. I returned to the cellar door. My hand hovered on the edge. My breath fogged in front of me. I stepped inside. The stairs were stone, chipped and slick with damp. I held the flashlight low, its beam wobbling with every breath I took. The air grew colder with each step, thick and wrong. I couldn't hear anything but the drip of water and the pounding in my ears. At the bottom was dirt. Just dirt. The floor was packed earth. The walls were stone. I swept the flashlight across the space. Shelves, cans, dust, old holiday decorations, and broken furniture. I exhaled. Maybe Edna had just lost her mind. Maybe this was, then I saw it. In the far corner of the cellar, behind a broken rocking chair and an old trunk, was a cot. A metal-framed camping cot, perfectly made, with a thin mattress, a folded fleece blanket, and a pillow in a floral case. Not covered in dust. Not torn. Just there, as if someone had slept on it last night. I walked closer, one step at a time, flashlight shaking in my grip. Beside the cot was a water bottle, empty, a crumpled wrapper from a chocolate bar. Snickers. Grandma didn't eat chocolate, and I hadn't bought that brand since college. Something icy slid down my spine. This wasn't storage. This was lived in. My knees buckled, and I sank beside the cot. The dirt was damp and cold beneath me, but I barely noticed. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it around the makeshift sleeping space. A bucket in the corner. A pair of worn-out women's slippers tucked neatly under the cot. Another chocolate wrapper. An empty can of soup. And then I saw it, half hidden beneath the edge of the mattress, pressed between a paperback romance novel and a crumpled fleece scarf, a cell phone. Old. Plastic. The kind with physical buttons, scratched screen, and faded lettering. A burner phone. I picked it up slowly. It was cold to the touch, but dry. Someone had tried to protect it, wrapped it in a Ziploc bag that had torn the corner. I pressed the power button. Nothing. I turned it over, found the battery panel, pried it open. The battery was still inside. When I pressed it back in firmly and closed the cover, the screen blinked just once. Then again, a dim blue glow flickered alive. My breath caught. There was one bar of battery left, and one notification, one unsent message. I clicked it open with trembling fingers. The keypad clicked loud in the silence. The message wasn't addressed. It wasn't finished, but it was there, typed in all caps. If I speak, it's over. For her. For me. That was it. No names. No punctuation. Just dread. My chest clenched. My hands turned numb. Who had written it? Who was her? My mind raced, jumping from Grandma to me to someone else entirely. My eyes swept the room again. The slippers, the scarf, the romance novel with bent corners, and a name scribbled on the first page. Jenna. I whispered the name aloud. Jenna. The cellar didn't answer, but my stomach twisted as if it had. I bolted up the stairs, the flashlight beam bouncing off stone and shadow. I burst through the cellar door, slammed it shut, and locked both the new latch and the old one. My breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. I leaned against the door, hand pressed flat to the wood, like I could hold everything down there inside. I grabbed my phone from the kitchen table and hit Ethan's contact. The call rang 3 times. 4. Then he answered. His voice was late. Too late. Hey, babe. Everything okay? I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. Finally, I said, I was in the cellar. Silence. A beat. 2. Then a laugh, short, forced. Seriously? Hannah, why the hell were you? There's a cot. I cut him off. Slippers. Food wrappers. A phone. Another pause. This one longer. He was calculating now. I could feel it through the line. That old bat Edna got to you, didn't she? He said finally. Hannah, you've been through a lot. You're grieving. You're not seeing straight. That cellar is full of junk. You probably saw a box, and there's a message, I whispered. On the phone. It says if she talks, it's over. The silence that followed wasn't dead. It was alive, writhing, dangerous. Then he spoke, calm and icy. You need to get some sleep. I'll be there in the morning. We'll clean this up. Together. He hung up. I stared at the screen, still glowing faintly. Clean this up. There was nothing left to clean. Only truth. And rot. Morning in Rosewell used to be quiet, but never cruel. I stepped out just after sunrise, still wrapped in Grandma's coat. The air was brittle and sharp, the frost on the grass crunching under my boots. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. But I needed tea. Sugar. Something normal. Something warm. The garrison's general store sat 3 blocks down, past the frozen creek and the empty bus stop where Grandma used to wait for me every summer. I knew every step of that walk. I didn't expect it to feel like walking through a war zone. The first woman I passed, Mrs. Eaton from the quilting circle, gave me a brief nod, then looked away so fast it was almost violent. Then 2 men near the post office paused their conversation the moment I walked by. One of them muttered something under his breath. The other chuckled low like a hurt to smile that wide. Inside Garrison's, the smell of overripe apples and motor oil hadn't changed, but everything else had. 3 women stood near the coffee aisle, whispering with heads bent together like schoolgirls. The moment I entered, they stopped. One of them grabbed her purse and practically ran out the door. The other 2 pretended to examine cleaning supplies, backs turned, eyes flicking sideways. I made my way to the counter, like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. "Morning, Hannah," said the clerk. "Kinda." Claudine Garrison had known me since I was 5. She used to give me red licorice ropes and let me ring the bell behind the register. Now, she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just tea," I said, "and some sugar. Bread, if you have it fresh." She moved slower than I'd ever seen her move, like her limbs were underwater, like touching anything I'd asked for might make her sick. She bagged the items. I handed her a bill. She gave me back the change, short, by maybe 30 cents. Not a lot, not enough to raise hell over. But I saw her eyes flat, steady, defiant, like she was daring me to say something. "Think you gave me the wrong change," I said softly. She didn't flinch. Maybe I did. We stood in silence, me on one side of the counter, holding a paper bag that suddenly felt like a boulder, and her behind it, with her lips pressed into a thin line. Then she muttered, just loud enough to hear, "Some things ought to stay buried, honey. That's how peace is kept around here." My stomach turned. I backed away without another word. As I stepped outside, the wind cut through my coat like knives. The women near the coffee aisle were watching me through the window now, watching like I'd just clawed my way out of the ground. I didn't understand. What had Ethan said to them? What story had he spun, and how had he done it so fast? By the time I got back to the house, my hands were shaking. Not from cold, from fury. He wasn't just locking me out of the truth. He was locking me out of my own past, my family, my town. And they all handed him the key. She showed up just before dusk. No, not just that unmistakable creak of the porch boards, followed by a shadow outside the glass. When I opened the door, Edna stood there in the same patchwork shawl, her eyes sharper than the cold wind at her back. "You found it," she said, not as a question. I nodded, wordless. "Then we need to talk." I stepped aside. She walked in like she'd done it 100 times before, like the house had always belonged to both of us in some quiet, invisible way. She didn't remove her boots, just sat at the kitchen table, folded her hands in front of her, and looked straight at the cell phone I'd placed beside the empty sugar bag. She didn't touch it. I sat across from her. She spoke first. "I should have told you sooner." "Why didn't you?" Her gaze shifted to the window. The orchard outside had turned gray in the fading light. "Because I didn't think you'd believe me. And because I was scared." I waited. "It started last fall," she said slowly. "Ethan began showing up more often. At first I thought it was sweet. A man visiting his wife's grandmother, helping out, checking on her. But it wasn't right. He only came at night, never stayed long, and always left like he was sneaking out of something." I closed my eyes. I could already see it, the pieces falling into place, jagged and hideous. "Then I saw him," she continued, her voice like gravel. "That winter, during the snowstorm. He pulled up without headlights, popped the trunk, and dragged her out. Skinny thing. Pale. She wasn't walking. He was holding her like she might bolt. And he took her straight into your cellar." My throat tightened. He locked her in, Hannah, and he kept coming back, bringing bags, supplies. I never saw her again after spring. I gripped the edge of the table. And Grandma. Louise knew, Edna said, almost in a whisper. Not everything, but enough. She started praying all the time. Wouldn't meet my eyes when I visited. She was scared and ashamed. I tried asking, but she just said, "Don't stir it, Edna. Don't make it worse." I swallowed hard. My mouth tasted like iron. Edna looked at me now, really looked. He had the whole town fooled. He told people your grandmother was letting in strays. Said she'd gone soft in the head. That he was cleaning things up out of love. They believed him. I shook my head. Why would he do this? Why bring her here? Why not? Because control don't always look like shouting, sweetheart, Edna said. Sometimes it looks like kindness, like help, like a man carrying soup into a dark cellar. My hands were trembling. The air felt thick, heavy like smoke in my lungs. Edna stood. Her eyes softened. You ain't crazy, Hannah. You're waking up. That's different. She walked to the door, but before she left, she turned back. He's not coming to get you. He came this morning while you were out. I saw him from my window. Locked that cellar tight again. I said nothing. He's trying to erase it, she said. But you saw it. You know. She stepped into the dusk. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat alone at the table, the phone, the scarf, the wrappers, and a truth that was no longer hiding underground. It was right here, and it had my name on it. The house felt heavier after Edna left. Not darker, just heavier, like something had finally settled, and in doing so, refused to be ignored. I wandered into the living room, not sure what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. My hands moved on their own, brushing over bookshelves, old picture frames, knitting needles in their basket. Things that used to make me feel warm, safe. Now they just felt quieter. Then I saw it. The photo had always hung by the window, me at 5 years old, curled into Grandma's arms. Both of us laughing so hard our eyes were closed. It was my favorite. I don't even remember who took it. Maybe Mom, back before she left. But I remember the way Grandma smelled that day. Soap, cinnamon, fresh grass. I took the frame down. Just needed to hold it. To feel something real. The back was sealed with old cardboard, held in place by rusted brads. I pressed my thumb beneath one, and it gave with a soft snap. I don't know why I did it. Maybe instinct. Maybe grief. I pulled the cardboard free. Something was written on the back. Barely visible. Soft pencil. Smudged from age and the oil of time. For words. Shaky, uneven. Her handwriting. Forgive me, H. The breath left my lungs. I sat down, the frame still in my lap, my thumb pressed over the faint indentations of those words, like I could warm them back to life. Forgive me, H. Not, I love you. Not, I'm sorry. But that, a plea, a prayer. She knew. Grandma knew what was happening below her floorboards. Maybe not all of it. Maybe just enough. And it broke her. I saw her face in my mind, the way it looked those last weeks, pale and lined, eyes always cast at the ceiling like she was listening for something. I thought it was age. Confusion. Now I knew better. She'd heard Jenna. Maybe her cries. Maybe just footsteps. But she knew, and she didn't stop it. And yet, she'd left this. I clutched the frame to my chest and bent forward until my forehead touched my knees. The sobs came fast, raw, unfiltered. This wasn't the cry of a granddaughter grieving. This was something older, deeper, like all the voices of the house had risen up through the floor to wail with me. I don't know how long I stayed that way. When the tears stopped, I wiped my face and placed the photo back on the mantel, gently, like it could still break. Everything had changed. Again, the anger was still there, yes, but it had shifted. It was no longer wild and directionless. It had shape now. It had weight. And it had purpose. I walked back to the kitchen. The scarf was still on the table, alongside the burner phone, the chocolate wrappers, the receipts. Each one a match, waiting for flame. Not literal fire. Something worse. Truth. I wasn't going to scream, or run, or burn the evidence to spare my own shame. I was going to expose it. Every inch of it. For Jenna. For Grandma. For me. She was standing at the gate. I almost didn't see her. The frost on the window blurred the outside world, softening everything into pale outlines. But something, maybe instinct, pulled my eyes to the front yard. And there she was. Still. Not moving. Not knocking. Just watching the house. She looked smaller than I'd imagined. Thin. Fragile. A girl more than a woman. Her jacket was too light for the weather. A worn denim coat with frayed cuffs and a tear at the shoulder. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, strands blown across her face by the wind. I froze. Jenna. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. She didn't try to open the gate. Didn't call out. Just stood there like someone waiting for a verdict, or a ghost afraid to return to the scene of its death. I stepped away from the window. My heart was hammering. What was she doing here? Why now? Did she know I'd found everything? For a split second, the old anger surged again. The image of the cot, the chocolate wrappers, my grandmother dying overhead while this girl lived in the basement. But then I looked again. Her jeans were torn at the knee. One shoe was untied, and she was limping, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. And the bruise, faint yellow, peeking out from beneath her right eye like a secret that had stopped trying to hide. That's when something inside me cracked. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't my rival. She was just another victim. Another woman caught in Ethan's web. Another life bent into silence. I grabbed Grandma's coat off the hook, slipped on my boots, and stepped onto the porch. She flinched when she saw me, like a deer catching the glint of a rifle scope. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Jenna. I asked gently. She didn't answer. I'm not going to hurt you, I said. I think we need to talk. Still nothing. She looked at the house, then back at me. Her eyes were wide, rimmed in red but dry. She didn't trust me. I didn't blame her. You can come in, I said. You're freezing. Her body tensed. I found everything, I added quietly. The cellar, the phone, the message. A breath left her lips, sharp and shaky. Her fingers twitched. I'm not here to punish you, I said, or to interrogate you. You don't owe me anything. But if you need warmth, or safety, or just silence, it's yours. I stepped back from the gate, gave her room. Space. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she opened the latch. The gate groaned on its hinges as she pushed it forward. She walked slowly, her limp more pronounced now, every step a question. I didn't speak, just waited. When she reached the porch, she paused. Her eyes searched mine. I nodded once. She crossed the threshold, not just of the house, but of something larger. A new truth, one neither of us would carry alone again. Jenna sat at the kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea she hadn't touched. Her fingers were trembling, but she hadn't spoken a word since she came in. I didn't push. I just placed the burner phone on the table between us, beside the crumpled scarf, the receipts, the half-melted chocolate bar still in its wrapper. Evidence. Not for a court. For clarity. She finally looked at me. Her voice was barely above a breath. I didn't think you'd believe me. I didn't say I didn't either. I just nodded. You don't have to explain, but I need you to stay, just for a little while. That night I didn't sleep. I gathered everything. Photocopies of the receipts. Photos of the cellar. I wrote a timeline. Dates, times, grocery lists, names. I made copies. One for the police. One for the news station in Portland. One for my lawyer. And one for Edna. The next morning I called a meeting. Just like that. At the town library. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just told them it was about Grandma. That it was important. They came. Claudine from Garrison's. Mr. and Mrs. Eaton. 3 women from the quilting circle, even the pastor, and Edna. She stood near the door, arms crossed, jaw set. Jenna stayed home, tucked into the guest room like a ghost, waiting to dissolve. Ethan arrived 15 minutes late. He walked in with his city jacket, his Rolex, and his smirk, like he'd come to pat me on the head and clean up the mess with a few charming sentences and well-timed sighs. But the room was already quiet, and then I spoke, not loudly, not with fire, just with facts, the burner phone, the receipts, the name in the romance novel, the scratch on the cellar door, the lock, the visits, the lies. I didn't raise my voice once. Halfway through, Edna stepped forward and said, "I saw it too." The room held its breath. Someone gasped. Ethan laughed. He actually laughed. "Oh, come on," he said, sweeping his arm toward the table. "This is insane. You people are listening to a grieving woman and a lonely old lady who's always had a vendetta against me." I turned to him, then explained the phone. He looked at it. His smile flickered. "Explain the message." He didn't. Just then the back door opened. Jenna stepped inside. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The room changed. No one screamed. No one shouted. But the air shifted. A current of understanding passed through them, quiet and irreversible. Ethan's face changed, not into rage, but into something worse. Fear. Because he knew he'd lost control. Not legally. Not yet. But in the only place that mattered, the story. His version of it had been rewritten. I picked up the photo of Grandma, the one with the words scrawled on the back, and placed it in front of everyone. She knew. And now we do too. Ethan walked out. Nobody followed. No applause. No closure. Just stillness. And beneath it, freedom.